Okay, let me know when everybody can see my screen. Okay, great. So today's session is about securing before you start Copilot adoption. So if you, wherever you are working, if Copilot is being used already, these are some readiness tasks that you should have done before implementing Copilot. If you haven't started yet, it's another way of looking at it. Like, this is so important. If you will come to know by the end of the session that why this is so important before you implement Copilot in your environment. Right. So has anybody in your organizations, wherever you work, how many of you are using Copilot already? This session needs to be a bit more interactive because the nature of this session is more technical, but I don't want to be too technical if it is, if it's not going to assist by being too technical. So if everybody can just answer that, if any of you are using Copilot already, just type 1. If not, you can type 0. I mean, just the people who are using, just type 1 in the chat. Great.
So sorry, Mr. Azam, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes.
I'm so sorry I got disconnected a little bit. But before you proceed, I think it's best that everyone knows who our speaker is for today. I know you probably have gotten an introduction in, but we need to make sure everybody is aware of the person who is before us today. So can you just give me 5 minutes of your time, please?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so today we are pleased to have with us Mr. Azam. I know he has started already, but obviously I can't just let him go ahead without an introduction because he's a seasoned technology leader and cyber security professional with us. He has over 2 decades of experience, and his experience actually cuts across cloud. So for those who are into cloud computing or security, which is cyber security, as well as digital transformation. So he is a Microsoft certified cloud and security architect and actually currently works at the intersection of cloud architecture. So he does security, he does compliance for modern enterprises also. And also he brings a level of deep practical experience in helping organizations. He has been helping organizations to prepare their environments so they could securely adopt Microsoft technologies. And in this session, he will be bringing that into today's topic. Now, if you notice, today's topic is actually to prepare security and compliance in order to support Microsoft 365 Copilot. For those of us who are not familiar with Copilot, you are going to get, we've been running a couple of sessions on Copilot, and if you've been attending them by now, it's not going to be anything strange. So we're looking at the MS-4002. Azam will be walking us through all of the critical security and compliance foundations required to enable Copilot responsibly while ensuring data protection, of course, because as you're familiar with it, Copilot is an LLM model. That's a large language model. And of course, a lot of people put a lot of information into this model. So if you're working in an organization, there are data protection uh, techniques or policies that should be followed. So Azam here will be showing us through those data protection policies. It's going to be showing us through governance and getting ready for your organization to adopt Copilot. And of course, I would want you to join me in welcoming Mr. Azam. I know it's coming a bit late, and I'm so glad to see you on the call today. I'm very, very happy to see you on the call. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much. We appreciate your presence. Okay, so over to you. I'll be handing over to him now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Cool. So Ayomede, right. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Yeah, it's always really hard to pronounce. So
yeah, Ayomede, right?
Just say AY. Mr. Zaf calls me AY, so AY is fine. AY.
Good. Okay, thank you. So that's
all right.
Yeah, you summarized me. So basically, Kanj Technologies is a cloud service provider specializing in security. We have our main organizations based in the UK, and we have our presence in India and the UAE. And yeah, we specialize in Office 365, Azure, AWS, cloud migrations, security, cybersecurity, in all of these areas. Right, for today's session, we have, this is the agenda. Obviously, about 20 minutes gone, but I think we should be able to cover. This is to give you an overview, an idea about the security readiness that you have to do in every organization while or before adopting, ideally before adopting Copilot. But these are, some organizations have started using it already, but it is still not a bad idea for you to just review all of these security checks in your environment, even if you are using Copilot, for you to make sure that there's no data leakages or unexpected data exposure or security threats your organization being exposed to exposed in the public. Right, so just to give you a quick overview of this APL 4002 applied skills credentials, I hope everybody's aware about applied skills credentials. So Microsoft introduced, I believe it's a year ago or maybe 18 months ago, the applied skills credentials. So the standard route was for you to go study for an exam, go to an exam center or do it online from your home, a proctored exam, which you call, and it'll be an online exam. You do your exam, and then immediately, soon after the exam, you get the results, whether you're passed or not. And then you renew that certification every based on the certification, that it'll be every year, every 3 years. It differs, but that requires renewal. But applied skills are basically targeted areas of a specific area. For example, in Azure, you can do a applied skill credential for how to secure storage. You can do an exam on Sentinel, which is a SIEM source solution, right? Similarly, this one is for applied skills is for Copilot readiness from a security perspective, right? And it's a lab-based exam. You log in, you go into that website, Microsoft Learn website, you log in, and then you start taking this exam based on the instruction. Within the set time period, you have to complete this. So that's, at the moment, unfortunately, this exam is going through a maintenance. So if you go to the Microsoft Learn, and if you search for APL 4002, it will still be under maintenance. They will probably be reopening it very soon, as there's lots of changes coming through within the Copilot ecosystem, how securing Copilot is, and there are lots of features being added. The exam is being modified as well. So today's session, what we're trying to do is how we prepare the M365 environment. And then there are 4 other main pillars, if you like, which is the identity governance, your device management, and the compliance settings, as well as information access controls, right? This is what we are going to see today. To give you a quick idea about the architecture of Copilot, you have your Copilot, there's variants. You have the basic version, which is a free Copilot, which will, when you prompt something, it will ground its responses from public internet, right? So whatever is available on the internet, as well as from the LLM, it'll respond to you. On the paid version of the Copilot, which comes as a M365 Copilot version, the difference is the grounding will happen on top of the web. It will also happen from within your office environment. So your SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, Exchange data, as well as SharePoint website sites, right? So all of these data, the Copilot will go and then find much more understandable, customized, personalized responses will be given if you use the paid version. What happens behind the scenes is when you put the prompt, it goes into a space called Graph API. So API is where Microsoft, all of these data from, there's millions of Office 365 tenants, all of those data is stored in one place, obviously many places, but those can be accessed using Graph API. So if you like, it's like the big gate that is there, where you can go into your own box of data where you have saved, and then Graph API will give you access to access those for applications, or when you click something on an application, that is what's happening behind the scenes. So, but Graph API was designed to respond to keyword searches like Google, or specific descriptive languages. So when you ask, okay, give me a list of mailboxes that we have in our tenant, you ask that using a specific script code, and then it will spit out those information from its Exchange store. But LLMs work slightly differently. It needs more context. It needs more information to prepare that contextual awareness and then give you a natural language response. So for that, Microsoft built this semantic index layer. So this layer is where it gets more context and provides that context to for grounding for Copilot, right? And then you also have Work IQ on top of that, which is the intelligence layer, which Microsoft calls, it's more context basically for the prompts, and then it's a personalized response for you to give. So instead of just looking at these sources, data sources that are being saved, destinations, and bringing like, if you have worked with databases, you ask, okay, where is this information and in which table? That's basically your scripting. Instead of asking it that way, when you ask, okay, I want to know how many people have email addresses that has more than 20 GB of space utilized, and you just ask as a human language, it goes in and it utilizes semantic index and Work IQ layers to get that information, as opposed to you remembering a set lines of codes to write and get that information. Okay, so and then AI agents, whatever that is inbuilt using Copilot Studio or Foundry within the Microsoft ecosystem, or you can bring other agents that are built outside of Microsoft ecosystem and bring it into Copilot environment. And those also utilize these two layers. Okay, so now the key aspect that we are going to see in today's session is this top layer where you see Exchange Online, which is your mails, where the mails are residing, the Teams, your Teams chats channels are residing, and then SharePoint. SharePoint is the backbone of your Teams. When you create a Teams channel, it creates a folder within SharePoint. So when you share a file within Teams, it is actually getting stored in SharePoint, not in Teams. So SharePoint is the storage of Office 365. And then you've got your OneDrive, which is your personal storage environment. When you log into your Office 365 account, you have your personal storage environment that is linked only to your account. That is OneDrive. SharePoint is a, if you like, it's a public within the business. So what we are trying to understand in today's session is how Copilot and agents, AI agents, can be secured, because the underlying method of them working is through permissions, right? If you've been assigned a Copilot license, what happens is if you have access to a mailbox, your Copilot can go and search information in that mailbox. You have access to Teams channels. Let's say you got access to a marketing Teams channel, a sales Teams channel, and then HR Teams channel, right? So now your Copilot has also the same permissions. So when you ask a prompt, let's say you're asking a prompt, is Julie Wins, has she left or still in the business? Then your Copilot will go to that HR Teams channel as well to find out information, not only your email, not only the SharePoint, wherever you have access to within your organization, your Copilot also has access, right? So that's the basic line, basic understanding. There should be the basic understanding of how Copilot gets access to, where can it go? So when you ask for a prompt, when you put a prompt in, and you ask for a question, it can go into all of those locations wherever you have access to and then find the answer for you. Okay. So the risk with this is it is great because it can go anywhere you have access to and find the information, which means it'll give you a better information. But the problem with this is it will also go into places that it shouldn't go to. For example, you've been given access to a HR folder only for, the intention was to give you access to one HR folder for maybe 2 weeks, because you have to do an assignment and that involves, accessing certain files from HR folder. And because of that, you've been granted access. And imagine that access has not been revoked after your assignment is finished or your project is finished. And it's been there for a long time and your IT forgets it and your HR team forgets whether you got access to it or not. They don't audit that. They don't change that to what it was before. Now you get Copilot. Now the Copilot can go and get access to it. So this is your business information, will be, you're accessing information that you shouldn't access. So that's the risk of exposing Copilot. I mean, when you start using Copilot, if you don't have proper permissions and security implemented in all of these locations, it's going to be a big risk. Right. So next, these are all the reasons which I mentioned, and then how we can protect. So there are mechanisms. We'll go one by one. First step is to prepare your M365 environment. Okay, so when you say M365 environment, your preparation works with Defender for Office 365, Cloud App Security, Copilot tenant settings, and audit logging. Right, these are 3 products. The last one, that audit logging is basically you need to have enabled the environment to say, okay, whatever the actions are being taken should be audited first. Only then, that is the key, point that out of all of this is, if you don't enable auditing, you don't know who's done what, because for that to be logged, this logging needs to be enabled. Okay. So let's dive into Defender for Office 365 and Defender for Cloud Apps. Right. So these are this is why I said this is going to be a little bit technical, but I'll go through the demo as well and try and simplify as much as possible. But this is the focus of this topic, and 4002 is all about securing the environment, right? Have you got any questions so far? Please feel free to type it in the chat box or raise your hand. Probably somebody will. I'm not looking at the chat box or the environment, so somebody should be assisting or maybe informing me, and then I can respond.
No, I got you, Azam. I got you. I got you. If there are any questions, please put your questions in the chat box. I will make sure Azam sees your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Okay, so I think it's much better to show this. So these are some of the tenant level Copilot settings, very high level, where first place is for you to go into the Copilot settings area and then turn on the Copilot for Copilot licensed users. Then you have the organization settings. These are 6 key settings, and then your browser for how when people log into open up Edge browser, do they want to see the Copilot on the right hand side? You can do that from the backend, and that can be enabled in your organization. And how I remember I mentioned about the Graph API, how the plugins and connectors within Copilot can connect to Graph API if they have different access levels using tokens instead of your username and password. Then they are a different channel to get into the backend store. So you need to secure those as well. So those are the settings in plugins and connectors. And for you to start using the Copilot, you need to then assign the licenses as well. Right, let's go into the demo of this. Probably share my screen. Share, so let me share my.
Oh, the presentation seems to have gone off.
Yeah, I'm sharing another screen now. So I hope you can see this. So
Yeah,
that's when
very
I'm
audible.
logged in. Yeah, cool. That's when I'm logged in. And if I go here, so that's the tenant, right? And under your settings, you will see the Copilot on the top, right? So if you go into Copilot, this is how the Copilot administration environment looks. I hope you're all familiar with this. And then you go to settings. It gives you a detailed deployment settings environment, okay? How the Copilot can be turned on the website, web searches, and Microsoft 365. This needs to be done here. All right. It gives you like a step-by-step assign an AI administrator, right? So in your environment, you first need is there should be an administrator who has the AI administrator role to manage the backend of Copilot. So if he has that, then they can start managing this environment. Okay, so and then your license. What are the license required for you to access Copilot? If you got one of these licenses, yes, you have access to, or you can just buy the standalone Copilot licenses, right? And then this, you can basically, these are, settings that you need to go in and enable. These are deployment settings for your environment to be ready to use Copilot, right? What it needs to be, okay, which apps it can go on to, Copilot can be used on all the Microsoft applications like Outlook, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, as long as your license provides that. You can still apply or block, these settings. So these are, and who gets access to these features basically, right? You can assign to a specific group or users. So I've got, let's say I'm only going to assign to a group called Copilot users, right? I have created a group called Copilot users and added who are the staff who will have access to Copilot. You just add those group in here. That way you're going to restrict access to a set of people instead of just allowing to all of the users within the environment. right? So those are some of the key settings. And the next step of this is, these are the data security settings. We will obviously see these in detail on the other sections, but I'm just highlighting these are some of the settings that you can utilize. It gives you a step-by-step walkthrough where this is sensitive info type, which is creating labels in Microsoft Purview. We will look at it towards the end of the session, but this Copilot setting page gives you that ability to configure, or at least give that visibility of what you need to do. And these are connectors you can connect to, different environments. So I said about when you prompt something on Copilot, your Copilot will automatically, you can enable, if you have the paid version, you can enable that to go into all of your environment wherever you have access to. But if you have other locations outside of Office 365, that is where you get these connectors. So you can connect to GitHub. You have a code repository where you connect GitHub, and then your Copilot prompts can now go into GitHub and find information and give you, bring you back information. You can connect to Google Drive. All right. So you're not just limited to your Office 365 environment. Now you're extending your Copilot to go into your Google Drive and bring information. So these are all, there's lots of connectors available where you can connect. All right. And at the moment, this tenant hasn't got anything. This is a fresh tenant, which I am using. Right. Next. And the licensing, if you go into this under the organization settings, under the settings and organization settings, you have, under the Microsoft Edge, it is the browser settings that you can do. Even here, the browser, where the browser connects, your configuration policies for your browsers can be found here. These are key settings that you need to utilize. And you go to your baseline security mode. So this one, if you, there are different ways of approaching security, right? For you to, Microsoft has set some baseline securities, and instead of you going and applying many of the policies, if your environment is fairly limited or a small environment, you can tick this apply default policies, right? This is and from Microsoft point of view, it is a baseline security which includes all of these within SharePoint, Enter ID. It will make sure that your environment is secure by default if you enable this. Otherwise, you will have to. These will also obviously create. If you're a large organization, there should be exemptions made, because these are blanket configurations that will apply and block. It's like a big block or unblock setting. Most of these sub settings are, but larger organizations will have incompatibilities, legacy products, some requirements to make sure that not everything is blocked, but we need to block 70% of the things, not 30% of the items that we have. So when you need that level of customization, you would not click on these. You would go into each of these environment, Enter ID, SharePoint, and then customize those settings based on the need. And now let's go into Defender Cloud Apps. So this is another setting that you need to configure. So if you go into Defender portal, so on your Office 365, you have your security. You click on security, and then that takes you to the Defender portal, right? one configuration that you need to do here is you go into settings and go into your Defender portal. So cloud apps and connectors. So this setting is like OAuth application. So there's two types of authentication. I hope most of you would be aware of this. There's username and password, and there's also authentication based on OAuth, which is basically to give access to an application that requires. So you must have noticed sometimes when you go onto a website and you try to say, okay, I want to access this website, it'll say use your Google account or use your Microsoft account to, when you click on that, there'll be another window that's coming up and asking, saying that this app will have read access to your, read your profile information, read your profile picture, read your email address, read your contact details from your Google account. That is essentially the OAuth authentication, right? That doesn't use your username and password. Instead, when you grant access to that application, it creates a token, and that token can live for a long time. So that token has access, right? So when you connect information to, when you connect external applications to Copilot, or like I showed you, like a connector where you connect a Google Drive, you must be connecting it for just one occasion to do certain searches on certain files that you have saved. And, if you forget it and it stays there, it stays there for a long time, and you will forget it, right? So this is where you need to monitor this environment. That is where your, this cloud application, cloud app connectors are important, OAuth apps, which is called, these policies are important. For example, I will show you one policy here. See, it shows you, what is being, you can monitor. For example, what you can monitor is file shared with unauthorized domain. Okay, so if your organization is canj.co.uk and you want to get an alert when somebody shares, information other than that domain, or other than a list of domains that you have listed, this is a policy that you need to configure. So this policy is key in terms of, before you apply OAuth apps, you need to create, you can create a new policy from scratch, and then from here you can say what types of threats you need to detect, what is the filter, apps. So this can go into the, much more detail, like, graph the connectors based on the connectors that you have connected, right?
Okay, I have a question, Mr. Azam. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay,
Yes.
yes. This is more like a personal question because this is going really well. I'm learning quite a lot, and I just wanted to ask this question, right? Uh, connecting something like Drive, like for instance, OneDrive to Copilot or even Google Drive or any of the other drives. Does that mean that automatically everything that has been in that drive, Copilot will have access to it?
If you connect to this, yes.
Oh,
Means you will have.
We have some people in the organizations that, just like you mentioned, we've set up connections like that, and they connected it to their drives, I think personally and all that. So basically, what you're saying is the connectors will allow full access into their drive. That is, Copilot to be able to access their drives and all that.
Exactly, because you're explicitly saying, I want to connect. It's like a tube that you're, connecting basically between Copilot's ecosystem and that external application.
Is that not a problem? Because then we have some people who forget those connections. Like after they've dealt with that particular document, they just totally forget the connection in there. It's there forever.
You have to be, this is why these are important, right? So this is one of the area, for example, on this one, you can go in and say, I have connected, right? If I go in here to settings, let me just show you one thing, go to cloud apps, okay? I can now see what is being connected in terms of my accessibility, right? Information protection. Okay, I have files. So I have, you have to, this is important in the, okay, file in monitoring is enabled. App connectors, connected apps, right? I have Office 365 connected, right? You can connect another app, let's say Asana, right? Or DocuSign, Dropbox. You are connecting, right? And then once you connect this is why this security setting is so important. Once you connect it, let's say if I connect, if I go and I can't connect now because I need to provide all of the information, but imagine if I connect Google Cloud, you haven't got Google Drive here, you probably, you can suggest more, but you can, at the moment, these are available. Let's say if I connect Dropbox and I have my files in Dropbox, I want to work using Copilot on these files that are saved in Dropbox. Once I connect it, right, those files are being monitored. And what I can do is this authentication that I provided, the app, the permission that I provided for that Dropbox to connect into this Copilot environment, Office 365, I can now go and create a policy, right, in OAuth apps, right, and say, expire that in 3 months. Okay, so you are basically, or maybe renew that, send an alert that this is there. All of these can be done by creating that OAuth apps policies. Do you understand? So this is very important, because if not, you would just be connecting. There's another element to this is you should, in your environment, if you're a business IT admin, IT manager, you should not be allowing users to go and click on, I consent to connect to this app. That should always be, a request should be coming to the admins, IT admins, right? Then the IT admins will review, okay, is this application, is this AI app that this user is trying to connect, is that secure enough, right? Is it following all the standards? Then you allow that. If not, if you allow your users, there's another setting in Entra ID for you to control this, right? You can control providing consent for users. Instead of giving the permission for users to allow that, you can restrict it to admins, and you can make sure that request comes to admins and only admin can approve that. So once you need to have that setting for this to work really well. Then once the admin is aware of it, okay, this Dropbox, somebody's asking for Dropbox, we will connect Dropbox through connector from the backend, and we will also put a policy saying that this connection needs to be monitored. Something goes wrong, or there's lots of file transferring happening to that or from here, it creates an alert. All of this monitoring can be done if it's managed properly, right? If not, people are going to just connect anything.
Thank you so much. That was very, very educative. I'm sure a lot of people learned something on that, because we have that issue prevalently in our communities right now. Thank you so much.
No worries. Okay, let's move on. So I mentioned about auditing. So for that, we need to go into compliance. Yeah, so under threat policies. So these are email security policies that, then applies to this is you have all of these policies that can be configured. For example, your email receives phishing links, spam emails are being connected, coming through, how your malwares are coming through. These can be managed using this, but then you also have preset, this, you can go into these and then, configure them very granularly to secure your environment. But if you're not sure about those, what Microsoft has done is there's something called preset security policies. Okay, you have built-in protection, standard protection, or strict protection. Okay, at the moment, the standard protection is enabled on this tenant. So that means, it has balanced actions for malicious content, balanced handling for bulk content. These are their safe attachments. And then if you click on strict protection, then it has much higher chance of blocking many things, but at also same time, you would probably need somebody who knows a little bit more about, monitoring this environment in your organization, which can sometimes be blocking genuine emails as well. So that means, you need an IT team or a security team who can monitor this, but your environment will be really, protected. These are some of the policies that you need to apply. Because the risk is, if you receive a phishing link in your email, right, and that was not detected by the email's security because, you had no email security or phishing links was not configured. Now, your Copilot has access to searching all of these emails, right? And imagine somebody said, there was a spam email saying that, to access, secure your bank account, click this, blah, 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 something. And then now you ask a question related to something that, and then your Copilot will actually, say that, oh, you have something like this email has come through from this person. You can, do this work using this link. So that can genuinely be a trusted solution, right? Because Copilot doesn't do that verification. This is why you need to make sure your emails are secure. What is landing in your mailbox inbox is secure, because your responses will be based on that. Okay, so that's essentially some of the basic settings that you need to do in Defender. And now let's go on to share my presentation. So the next area is identity governance, right? So identity governance also again has security defaults. This identity governance is everybody has a username and password, right? There's two types of identities in an enterprise environment, which is your username and password. So if somebody gets access to your, gets your credentials, they can log in. So that you need to secure that. And the methodology to secure the username and password is different from the second type of authentication, which is using your service principals or application registrations, whichever way you want to call, which is basically using an ID and a secret key, right? Which generates a token, and that token is your access, right? So for you to access Office 365, you would enter your username and password. If those two are matching with what is already being configured in your Office 365 environment, you are allowed to access whatever you can, right? Based on your permissions you have, it will allow. The same way, a application principal or a service principal has an ID and a secret, and that secret is being basically checked. If something is trying to access, it'll see, okay, is this token valid? we have this token in the database, let's give access to it. And it's already there. And once it gets access, it is there, unless you define a date for the key to expire, right? So the first part, securing your identities and governing your identities more important. So within Office 365, Entra ID, so this is the solution Entra ID. Entra ID is where all your organizations, identities are stored, and your baseline protections are there. So there are some, like I showed you in M365, within Entra ID, you have security defaults, something called security defaults. If you enable that for smaller organizations or organizations that hasn't got legacy authentication, much more complications, you can enable that. And Microsoft will apply a set of policies that will make sure on a base level your organization is secure, which are, for example, what are the mechanisms that we can protect our usernames and passwords? You use an additional form of authentication, verification, for example, your second factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, right? So that could be your phone using an authenticator app where you set up, so you have your username, you have your password, you enter those. Now it goes to the next layer to check whether it's you by sending a prompt to your authenticator app that is installed on your phone. So you see a code on the screen, and then you type that code in this on the authentication app that lets you in. That's the next level. The level after that is, for you to protect is pass keys. So pass keys, you must have seen, okay, from when you try to log in, okay, this website allows to save pass key. Pass key is an additional layer of where using your information, it'll save a key on the device. It could be your phone, it could be your laptop, because all the laptops have a key vault storage location where keys can be stored securely. So that means with the authenticator app, sometimes you can log in, somebody else can log in. So if I have an account set up in, let's say, in Office 365, and I am normally accessing my Office 365 from UAE, and if I am going out of UAE and somebody else in the UAE still wants to access my account, and I can share the password, and I might be abroad, but I can give that code to the person who is accessing from UAE, which then they will be able to access. That is with MFA. Even with MFA, if users are compromised, this is why we see the username and passwords are stolen, and then the user gets a message saying this, and they somehow connect to that user and try to get that OTP message, right? Is a SMS, or maybe if they know, they can try and get the MFA prompt as well, through some sort of social engineering. But with passkeys, that is not the case. So I have to be close to the device, because if I have the passkey saved in my phone, the phone needs to be close, within close proximity of the device that I'm dialing in. So if I need to dial in, from UAE, I have to use my phone, I have to be very close to my device. So that's passkeys. So these are mechanisms that you can use, but applying MFA will possibly, there's lots of reports, Microsoft, security reports are there, as well as independent reports saying that if you apply MFA on all of your users, you are reducing your chance by 96 to 99%, 99.6%, I think, of your the possibility of you getting hacked or attacked, right? And legacy authentication in organizations, we know that printers need to send scanning information, scanned data, or SMTP information, alerts, notifications. They need legacy authentication. They don't work with the modern authentication. So, in those cases, you would not, you can't enable security defaults. You probably will be using, you disable the security defaults, but you have to then be very careful about your, organization's identities, manage those. So the environment to manage these are, this is in Entra ID. Let's go to Entra ID and before we move on to the demo. And the last two tools, so here the other feature within Entra ID is conditional access. Conditional access, we already know that it is another layer of protection where you can go in and apply some granular applications. This is where we're going to see a method how Copilot users can be, we can ensure that all of the users who have Copilot needs to use MFA. We can enforce that using conditional access policies. Conditional access policies are basically you apply some if and else conditions to a particular scenario. For example, somebody is signing in from an insecure device, right? Unmanaged or an insecure device that is not enrolled to your organization's MDM, then you can block access using conditional access, saying that, okay, when somebody is accessing Copilot from this type of a device, don't allow, right? When somebody is accessing Copilot, when a corporate provided, corporate owned, enrolled, compliant device, only then you allow. You can put all of these policies, right? Or you can also say, because if your organization is only based in Dubai, there is no need for anybody else to log in from, US or UK or, Russia or anywhere in the world, any other parts of the world. Then what you can do within conditional access policies is that you can say, this is the only trusted location, the country, and anybody who is signing in from here, you can allow, but anybody else signing in from any other countries, don't allow. That immediately reduces your, attack vector surface. So those conditional access policies, and then you have privileged identity management, which can be implemented, which is privileged identity management is a methodology to reduce admin, the privilege accounts. So within an organization, if there is a standard user who hasn't got any access, but just access to, let's say, Office 365 tools, and they don't have an email, they just have Office, for example, Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Access or something. If that account is compromised, the impact to the organization is less compared to the administrator's account get compromised, right? Who manages, let's say there is a user who is an AI administrator who can manage who gets Copilot licenses, what can be connected, what cannot be connected, who can manage all of these aspects of the tenant. If his account is compromised, that is going to be a disaster basically for the organization, because that's where you need much more security to be implemented. So that is where privileged access management comes in, privileged identity management comes in, where you say to your admin, okay, AI administrator is assigned, this role is assigned to an administrator, but that administrator needs to get permission from somebody. They can't just, when they log in, as soon as they log in, it is not there. The permission is not there. You go and have to activate it. Once you activate it, you can also put more conditions saying that the activation needs to go to a manager, and that manager needs to approve for this person to get an activation, right? And not only that, you can set a time limit, okay? Because this AI administrator doesn't need administrator role throughout the year. He only needs it when he needs to do some work. So he goes and activates it. You can set a time limit. This is only active for 30 minutes or 1 hour. So he will try and complete it in 1 hour. If not, he will extend or maybe request another request to reactivate it. But then once in 1 hour's time, that permission is basically deactivated for that user. So when he logs in again after 1 hour, that is he doesn't have that same permission. So, and then you need to continuously monitor this, who's getting access to what. And like I said before, if you get access to a HR folder, if you grant access to a HR folder, you need to keep monitoring this, review this access on a monthly basis, a weekly basis, or quarterly basis to see who's got these access to sensitive folders. And you can say, oh, right, okay, so this person should not have access to this folder, because by looking at the report every week or every month, you can remove those, you can act upon, right? So I will quickly show you this. Okay, let's go to Entra ID. So Entra ID, first of all, I'll just quickly show you all. The properties, let's go to the, I'll show you the security defaults, right? If you go to the properties of Entra ID, you will see this button here. It shows, you can turn on this. This is basically full access. And I've disabled security. Security, I've disabled security defaults for this. So this is where you will see if your security defaults is enabled, you will see that it is ticked and you have the option to disable that, right? Once you disable that, but why would you disable this? There are, like I said before, it could be there are some legacy applications that you need certain, legacy authentication methodologies to be implemented in your organization, or you have Entra ID P1, which gives you access to a conditional access, because security defaults is like very high level. It's either block everything or open everything. So what you can do is you can open everything, but then start blocking individual services the way you need, the granularity you need. You can do all of those using conditional access policies, right? The next we can have a look is how you impose using conditional access policies, how you enforce Copilot users to make sure that they are signing in from a secure device, and also they will have to use MFA when they sign in. So for this, one of the prerequisites is you need to go into your enterprise app. This is a pre-requirement because at the moment Microsoft hasn't got, there is I will put this in the chat if required. This application registration needs to be done in your app registrations within Entra ID. The reason being, this is not yet in place. Go to app registrations, all application. This is so if I go into conditional access, so you have to, I can share the guide on how to create. It has to be created using PowerShell, unfortunately. You have to create that app. And then once you create that app, that is basically to an app that has the platform for Copilot for security as well as Copilot environment, okay? So in conditional access policies, what we're going to do is I'll just show you. We will create a new policy. So this is to enforce MFA and access Copilot using managed secure device. So this is the description of the policy, right? Who is it going to be targeted to? All users. All users. And then what is it going to be targeted to? Resource. This is where you need to say this is the, not this one, sorry. Has to be specific resource. You got all of these report. For example, if you want to say anybody who's signing into your Office 365 admin portals, they need to have pass keys, then you can select this. This will be their target resource. But in this case, Microsoft hasn't got that Copilot and Copilot for Security enterprise environment like this. So that's why the first step of creating that application through PowerShell is important. Okay, so if I search by that ID, application ID, I can get this because I already created this in this tenant. So you select this. So what this means, any user, this is all users, right? Any user in this organization connects to Copilot or Copilot for Security will have to, then I'll say, what are the access control? They will have to provide multi-factor authentication, and they require device to be compliant. So if your organization's laptops and devices are enrolled into Intune, like an MDM, then on that MDM you can say a compliance policy that any device.
Alhamdulillah, not everything. Yeah, I put but at one point, at one point you can, like, how do you say, drag and drop
I
documents
think
to the
everything Zafar, somebody's mic is on.
Okay, you can continue, please.
It's, yeah. So, once you apply these, it will not allow anybody who is signing into Copilot without a secure device, a compliant device, and without a MFA. So they will be enforced to, perform the MFA authentication when they do this. So that's an access conditional access policy that can be implemented, right? And we've also got.
So this policy would force the fact that they have to authenticate before they have access to it.
Exactly. I mean, you can assign the license. This is when you assign the license, they will access it. But what you can do is make sure they are accessing, when they have Copilot access, they are basically making sure that they are the people who are accessing, right? So even if somebody has compromised their account because of the MFA challenge and the device challenge, the user must be fulfilling MFA, but they might be connected to their laptop might be connected to an airport non-secure Wi-Fi when they're in the airport or in the cafe or somewhere. So in that case, this policy will not allow that person to connect to Copilot.
Okay, good. So we have someone here, and Nate is actually pointing out that this level of security seems very critical, especially for school settings. That is, when you are dealing with students. Sometimes you assign devices to students. You want to make sure that, because there's actually no limit to what students can access these days. I think we are all familiar with students and all that. So you want to manage the kind of what they can do, the things they can do. So these will be very, very, very good for school settings. So thank you so much, Mr. Nate. Please proceed, sir.
Great. Okay, so I'll just quickly highlight on the privilege identity management. This is where I was saying, let's say I've assigned AI administrator. Let's say not this. I have assigned AI administrator to Copilot admins. Okay, they are the only people who can perform administrative task when it comes to. So this is the role, right? This is privilege identity management, right? So with this role, what I have done is Alex is the only person who's got access to it, right, at the moment. So if you go into the role setting, this can be configured. This AI administrator role we can configure for Alex, but Alex will not have it permanently. You can set the duration. This is what I was mentioning about the times, right? At the moment, by default, it is on 8 hours, but you can reduce the time, set it. This is what you call, in another way, is also just-in-time access. So you can reduce it to, half an hour. And you can also make sure that administrator, when they're trying to activate this, you may put another Azure MFA requirement. So they, make sure they are accessing it using MFA. So they're, and then you can also ask somebody else to approve it, and, something else it can be applied, which is the passkeys, which I mentioned. Or you can also attach the same policy that we created using conditional access, which is to link your conditional access policy that had device restrictions. So all of these can be done. So for example, I am logged in as, this is how Alex will see. So this is Alex, okay? Alex is logged in here. So when he goes to privilege identity management and my roles, he has to come here and activate this. So only after activating, he will get the AI administrator role, and that is assigned for 8 hours. He can also, if he thinks it's only going to take 1 hour for him, he can reduce the time and he can activate it. So that way, he also needs to put a reason here, okay, to perform connect security. So he needs to put a reason why he's activating this, and then it'll go through this process and it'll activate it. So that's PIM for privilege identity management. So these are some of the Entra ID configurations for before you can apply Copilot to secure your Copilot environment and the users who are using Copilot. Next, I will go to the presentation. So next is your device management, like I mentioned. Within your organization, schools, your devices are there. Securing your devices is most important, because it doesn't matter how secure your account is. If your device has lots of malwares and viruses, you are going to spread it to all of the environment, right? So device compliance is so important, whether it's mobile phones, whether it's iPads, laptops. These all can be enrolled into Intune. And then from there, you have compliance policies, which is in this tile here, where you can say every device needs to be encrypted when they join to the network. You can, if you have a school, you can make sure every laptop, every device that connects to the school's internal Wi-Fi needs to be encrypted, right? It needs to be fully enrolled into Intune. It needs to have a certain Windows version, that way not everybody can just access, because they have the Wi-Fi access code, username, the passcode. They will not be able to just connect their device, because there will be a guest Wi-Fi which will not have access to the internal network. So this way you can implement compliance policies and put those guardrails basically. And then you have configuration policies to make sure if you're using a company phone, it has to have 6 digits of over there. Windows Hello for Business is much more secure, like the passkey basically. You don't need to remember passwords, right? And device encryption requirements and what browsers can the devices use, all of these can be enforced using the configuration policies. And then endpoint protection, your anti-malware, antivirus protections can be pushed from endpoint policies. So these are And again, I'll quickly show one of these policies within Intune, where you can have something called BYOD, bring your own device. So like in organizations, it's universities, schools, even organizations should allow employees and staff to bring their own device and work, but they need to make sure they're not copying data out of the devices or copying data from their personal into the work applications. These can be highly tightened and protected using app protection policies within Intune, right? So these types of capabilities are there, and I have demo, but I think we're running out of time. But I'll just show this one because this will be another interesting one if anybody would like to implement, and this will be useful for you if you are planning to take the applied skilled certification. So for this, I will go to endpoint.microsoft.com. Okay, I hope you can see my screen now. So this is endpoint Intune, endpoint device management. And if you go to, this is the compliance policies where you can create. And this is where you can, there's a baseline compliance policy that can be done. You can create a policy and, apply it to different platforms. You have the conditional policies, and you also have app protection policies in here. So when you go to app protection policy, this policy specifically, let me say I have a block copy policy here, right? So this one shows what can be done. So is a block copy content. So, for bring your own devices, right? This is on for iOS and iPad OS. So if somebody's bringing their own iPad or iOS, you can allow them, but let's say you have installed, you have asked them to connect to emails, your company emails and Teams and SharePoint, right? Now you need to make sure that they don't copy content from their SharePoint on the phone to, let's say, onto WhatsApp or something. So you need to make sure that a rigid tightness, the boundary is tightened really well, even though they use their own device, but it is not fully managed by the company. This is where you would apply app protection policies right? So these are, for example, you can see all of this information. Restrict, cut, copy, and paste between other apps. These are, and then allow users to open data from selected services. What are they allowed to use? They are allowed to use the photo library, camera, SharePoint, OneDrive for business only when they use these Office applications. So these type of customizations and configurations can be done for this through this endpoint management, right? And next is you have the compliance settings. So compliance is data leakage prevention. data leak prevention is DLP. This is from a very high level governance point, data governance. So you need to, within your organization, first, for all of this to work using Microsoft Purview, you need to scan your all your data and make sure you have classified that data. You have to label the data that is in your organization environment. For example, there are some information that all of the users, all of the staff can see. You will call it general. Public is there are some information in the companies that can be shared publicly. For example, marketing team has certain marketing materials, sales team has sales materials that is available for public use, right? You will publish it in your website, in other sources of media. You will tag them as public. This is what the labeling is. And there will be files that are confidential about your employee information, your business data, and then there will be much more confidential information about your financial data, your key business information. These should be tagged as you need to have this labeling done first, and based on those labeling, what you can do is within DLP, you create a policy, for example, saying if anybody is sharing information about about credit cards, right, which would be the finance team will have some information sharing over to HR or other departments. Your Copilot should not go and find this information. You need to restrict Copilot from accessing this type of sensitive information. You can easily say, once you have labeled your whole environment, your OneDrive, your Teams, your email, once you apply the label, you can apply policies to say the label, confidential label, Copilot should not be accessing these labels. These policies can be applied using Microsoft Purview. So this is really powerful when you use Copilot. If you don't use Copilot, like I said earlier, wherever you have access to, the Copilot can get information. And this means if a user had access to a finance folder, a HR folder, which will definitely have confidential information, then your Copilot will find that information for the user. They will not know where the path is in terms of accessing the folder directly because they lost the path. But now Copilot, when you ask a question, how much is this person getting in the organization? That can easily reveal if that user already had some sort of access, right? So this is where it is really important that you need to restrict Copilot where it can go and where it can't go, right? So Purview is one of the key solution with the available from Microsoft for you to use. I think I have it here as SharePoint. So let me show you. Let me show you very quickly. I think we are 3 minutes over. Hopefully we'll be finishing in about 5 minutes. So that's Purview. If you go information protection, you have these sensitivity labels, right? Labels are not only tags, it can also do more things. For example, you can say if a particular type of information is found, encrypt that information. Okay, so these are the policies that can be done. For example, for the public labeled information, what can be done? For general labeled information, anyone has unrestricted access, and also all employees, right? You can do that. Confidential, what are you going to do with confidential information, right? So for example, if you want to create a block access for Copilot policy, then you would come and create this policy like this in here, which says files and data and email. This is the scope where it's looking for. Okay, wherever basically, because files and other assets in emails and meetings, and looking for the content. And if you go to the DLP, data loss prevention, and you go to the policies, I created a policy for, let's look at the policy that I created for credit card, okay? Detect default policy for Teams, you know, what is the default policy? And then detect financial data, right? You see this one here. This policy is created to detect credit card data. So it will be detect and block credit card details for in files and folders, right? So my locations, Microsoft 365 Copilot. So this is important. So once you go to, I'll show you a quick create policy. Here it has to be custom policy, and then you create, let's say, block Copilot from accessing medical. There's a medical identification number for each person, right? So it's a personally identifiable information, PII information. Let's say personal identification. So we can say within the organization, Copilot should not be accessing any of these information. And here you can come and see Microsoft 365 Copilot and Copilot Chat. These are the locations that these policy will be scanning information for, type of the labels. And once you enable this, all of them will be gone. So now it's looking at Copilot and where the Copilot can be. And then now you create the data loss prevention policy saying detect and block Copilot from accessing medical IDs, right? So then you come up and what is the protection content? Sorry, I haven't done this content. Yeah, so you can sensitivity in 4 types, and then you can search for, let's say, medical, all medical, physical, you see, all of these are types of information that you can block. It can be, a specific country is one. So for example, if it is UK, driving license, numbers, whatever that's been seen, I'll just these sensitivity labels. I'll see. Let's go to the info types again. I can bind. See, all of this information is available, credit card number, right? Different country-based numbers, because Microsoft has all of this information. See, EU social security number, right? EU passport numbers, it can find all of this information. So I'm just, this is for the sake of demonstration, so I'll just put EU social security number. So what you're saying to Copilot is don't go and find this information. Even if the prompt is there, don't go and find it. This way, you're restricting access to personally identifiable information or sensitive information. And you can also do what should be doing processing prompts, how should you restrict it? And then, once you say that should be blocked and you save that, your Copilot will comply to this policy. So this is where an important element of data protection when using Copilot. And then finally, this is governance in terms of general SharePoint and OneDrive access. Within SharePoint sites, there are lots of controls where you can make sure that the SharePoint environment is not providing information, because SharePoint by default comes with certain default configurations. For example, if you go to this is SharePoint, if you go to the SharePoint settings, one information, sharing, you will see when in SharePoint or OneDrive, when you right click and try to share something, by default, it will come up with anyone with a link can, have access to it. It's because from the backend, this is by default, this is selected. So now you want to go and make sure that you select only people in your organization, will come up as a default option. Then users will not be mistakenly sharing it with outsiders or anybody who gets that link with the ability for them to download that information, these type of settings. And then you also can restrict, if you go to sites, for example, you can restrict who can, for example, in this site, if I go to read this, there's a site called Team Priorities, right? A SharePoint site. And I need to make sure that Copilot should not be accessing this information from this site, regardless of who has access to it. So if you are a user who has content editing rights or as an editor of this site, I am saying, okay, this person because now you have a Copilot license as well, means your Copilot will come and find information from this site. But I want to make sure that this site has no none of the Copilot users should be getting information from this site. Means I can always come here and restrict this and site. So I can say indexing site content. What about the visibility? Allow this site to appear in search results. I can say no. When you do this, automatically Copilot is restricted from accessing this site, and the search will not be there. So these are, and then there's another key module that Microsoft has released since the Copilot launching is the advanced management option, where you can restrict searches, restrict content, data access governance reports. You can see OneDrive access restrictions, who can access what. You can also set life cycle, which means, okay, how long one person has access to, is there a review period? All of this can be done. This is an advanced licensed version, but this can give you very much granular permissions if you want to control, for you to control Copilot as well as agents that are within the Copilot ecosystem can access. Right, so that's pretty much it. And with this information, and if you need a little bit more information, you can always find this in the Microsoft Learn about each of these topics, and then you can go ahead and complete your MS-4002 lab certification. Thank you for your time. And then if anybody has any questions. AY, are you? We can't hear you. No. See, you're trying to talk, but we cannot hear. Okay, so there's a question. No, you're not audible, AY. Okay, I can see a question from Manish asking about the difference between service principal and how it differs from a user. So a user will by standard use a username and password to access certain portals, services within Office 365. But a service principal will not have a username and password. It'll have a secret. And once it's trying to access, what we do is we have to specifically, like a user, we have to specifically allocate where it can go and what it can do on an application level. So it is from an application to application, when the communication happens, you would use a service principal. Service principal is a concept within the Microsoft ecosystem. And also you have a different types of names, but the idea is that it's basically inter-application communication for those communications, access permissions, authentication and authorization. A service principal will be used. And what is the secure way, regardless of those are two different things again. The way you secure them will be different. This one, on the service principal side, you have to make sure that your token the secret that you generate is rotated quite frequently, so that even if somebody gets access to that or get the code of the secret key, they will not have permanent access into your environment. You're rotating it, that changes. So yeah, I hope you answered the question.
Thank you very much. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Sometimes these technical things happen. And actually, I know a lot of people will have a bunch of questions, considering the fact that Azam showed us the very, very, very practical end of this. And it showed it directly from his organization's kind of view, from what it does. We noticed it moves from conditional access controls, it moves to other kind of controls. There's a lot of things you covered for us. We really, really appreciate that. I think this was a very, very good session. This was a very wonderful one. So on behalf of the organizers, I would like to extend our sincere thanks to Azam Mazuk for an insightful and practical session on this topic, which is to prepare your security and compliance to support Microsoft 365 Copilot. And at this point, you can, of course, ask Azam any questions. You can see it's ready for any questions. I mean, this is his thing. It's nothing big for him. He's going to answer all your questions. So he has basically walked us through the critical security, compliance, and the governance considerations that organizations must address to enable Copilot responsibly. So we truly appreciate the depth of this, your experience, and the clarity you've brought to today's discussion. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So,
you're welcome. Thank you.
So once again, Mr. Azam is a seasoned cloud and security architect with extensive experience, like we've all seen, is basically majorly supporting enterprises with adoption of Microsoft technology. And he has shared with us his expertise today. Now, for those who are not very aware, we are looking at it from the lens of Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, because obviously you can see that we've had a lot of people put in a number of access, which is not supposed to be, putting it into the Copilot and the rest of it. So Adam here is showing us exactly how to mitigate those problems, right? So thank you so much once again. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And
thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So, and also, before we proceed, just so that everybody else can have an idea of what is on ground, if you register for the session, you can of course check your email. You would have gotten an email. Your email will contain next steps for you for this session. You'll see the next steps right on that email. So Shahana will be pasting in something so you can follow along. You can follow the process on how to walk through with the next steps on your email. Before we start, I'm just going to something. I'm going to just a minute. Okay. So you'll be given access to the Skillspot platform. Right? The Skillspot learning platform, you have to complete the three trainings and assessments. And then Microsoft will email you with an exam voucher. Yes, the voucher will usually take 7 to 10 working days. So it usually will take 7 to 10 working days. So your Fieldport learning platform access will be sent to your email address. If we have any further questions, please go ahead and ask your questions. We still have Azam on the call. I know he's a very busy person. We still have him on the call here with us. Okay. So do we have anybody coming in from Nigeria today? If you are in from Nigeria, you can please type in the chat that you are here with us. Do the chat. Okay, I'm going to display my screen at this point. Okay, so thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. The next session will be communicated. Of course, these sessions are totally free, and you can basically give a review on the session. I want to encourage you actually to use a review of the session, what you've learned and all that. You can make a video review, or rather a video testimonial. Testimonial is the word. It's going to be featured on the Micro website, on the website also. So you're going to be a part of that. If you do not know how to do it, you can send in a message. We'll be there to assist you with everything. So thank you so much, everyone. And of course, this time, unfortunately, I think I forgot to share the proper way again. I'm going to just do that right now. Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone. We'll meet again